Today's guest is Turgut Jabbarli, CEO of Vested in You. Turgut helps companies in traditional industries like construction and manufacturing leapfrog in the future with AI-first ERP systems. Today, we'll explore how his team cuts implementation times by 75%, why trust, not tech, is the key to adoption, and what business leaders can do today to stay competitive in an AI-powered world. Turgut, welcome to Just Curious.
Thank you for having me.
Can you introduce yourself and Vested in You?
Yeah, for sure. So at Vested in You, we have been building AI-grade enterprise solutions for almost past decade. Most of our background and is in the data world. Early on, we started really in the enterprise world where we thought, okay, when AI 10 years ago, 8 years ago was still not where it was and it was still hype. Technology wasn't where it is today. And we thought the enterprise world was going to adopt it at the fastest rate, which still wasn't the ideal world back then, but it took a lot of education to get there. It took us for 4 or 5 years. We continued to do that, and we continued building in the world of e-commerce, banking, recruitment, Web3. And since COVID started, we kind of had our research budgets cut into basically zero or half, and kind of forced us to rethink our strategy in terms of where we want to take the company. And since the last 3 years of the ChatGPT moment, it really forced us to think, where is the biggest gap in terms of like potential innovation and improvement in the world? And we felt it's in the traditional ecosystem. So currently we are helping the traditional industries like manufacturing, construction, hospitality, and some private equity to help them basically operationalize their like whole suite of operations to be competitive in the world of AI, because without technology, it's going to be very hard to stay in business.
Yeah, and that operationalization um, looks like building AI-powered ERP systems. For those unfamiliar, what does that mean in the day-to-day operations of a construction firm or a restaurant group?
Yeah, so right now our majority customers are in manufacturing. Basically, when we say ERP, it's basically centralizing all your operations under a single hub. So it can be your procurement, your inventory, your project management, your manufacturing, accounting, financing, shipping, logistics. So we basically try to bring that all in together under one roof. So the biggest challenge right now is most of these SMEs still rely on Excel sheets. Be surprised, they still rely on manual workflows to run their business. And what that creates is a lot of inefficiencies. And in most cases, basically the business runs blindly because they don't have a full picture every time running their business. So the biggest, when we say ERP, it usually scares people because what we are used to hearing multi-million-dollar ERP projects, and
Yeah.
even then it would go fail in a couple of years. So it's really, when you said trust, not tech, it's really that component where people are really scared of such implementation to bring all their business into one place, because it's very hard it used to be very hard to do it, but now thanks to AI, it has dramatically changed basically the field of ERP. So right now we basically say, hey, we will come in and operationalize and streamline your back office operations so you can run your business on your own terms rather than your business running you, and in some cases running you to the ground.
Yeah. And you noted that a traditional ERP implementation um, might start at millions of dollars. What does AI unlock, and what does your approach look like?
Yeah, so when we first came into this ecosystem, like we used to build enterprise solutions and ERP wasn't our wheelhouse. But once we started looking into it, we saw that, okay, there's a lot of noise in terms of the vendors, the partners, the ERP platforms. And most of the time, the business owner would be taken advantage of because they don't really have a full grasp of what technology is, how they can use it, what are the timelines, the budgets associated with it. So basically, whole essence for SMEs now, right now, is because of AI, they can leverage that technology to cut down on implementation times, right? So it used to be over a year to completely build an ERP system. Right now, we can do that in 3-4 months, production ready. That's all because of the AI, how modular the technology became. So you can basically leverage technology to build out custom solutions at scale. So that's basically thanks to all the recent developments in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah. And what does modularity mean for a manufacturing company or a restaurant group? Is it you can start with inventory as one area and then scale like beyond that? What does
Yeah.
it typically look like?
Yeah. So in most cases, what businesses do is they use fragmented software like accounting for this, inventory management for that, project management, sales, CRM for that. So basically, all those software is like a module. So, but the most efficiency is gained when these modules are talking to each other, and that's where the ERP kind of comes into place. And because of the how technology is built and through AI, and also we leverage a lot of open source software, which is backed by a lot of community work. And the architecture behind it is basically allows us to build modular solutions without like worrying about how it's gonna be when you need to do much more complex operations, right? So what we actually recommend to our customers or partners is to start small and use like inventory or sales or use procurement and inventory together. And once you are comfortable with those operations, we can add the other modules basically in sequence, which is not going to disrupt your operations. It's probably going to give you much more confidence to understand how this all works. And basically the modularity comes from the functionality. So each module you can think, hey, can I have my accounting talk to my sales talk to my procurement talks to inventory, and all that to talk to my project management and manufacturing. So that's basically where the most of the efficiencies are made, because these technologies now are mostly modular, can run on single use case or can run on multiple use cases efficiently.
What drew you to these more traditional industries, and what's changed over the last few years that has made this moment the right time for traditional industries to embrace AI-powered solutions?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, we on top of our like AI work, we used to help companies, especially in Canada, to subsidize the technology research work they were doing. So back then, we talked in a year like 250 companies in manufacturing, construction, production, hospitality, and technology companies. And what we felt is the biggest opportunity relies within the traditional ecosystem. And most of these people don't even realize how technology can help them grow and make their business run much more smoothly. Instead of thinking, hey, I need to do, for example, accounting, I need to hire an accountant. I need to scale my operations. I need to hire one more person. So in which case where they didn't really take into account the power of technology, that's where we thought, okay, that's the biggest leap of innovation that can happen. And when you actually look into just even S&P 500, most of the innovation still happens in the top 10. They call it Magnificent Seven. Let's call it top 10. And the rest of the companies, if you just look at their earnings growth and their like just stock market performance, they're still lagging like a lot after the like big tech companies, we call it, right? So then that's usually where the biggest innovation can happen, but nobody wants to go there, deal with SMEs, because usually you have budget limitations, you have timeline limitation, you have resource limitation. But because of AI, how scalable it became, how cheap it became, now you can do things on your own even, right? You can overnight spin up your app, and there are very interesting cases for that. You can use Replit, Lovable to spin websites, to spin products out where it used to be not possible without a team of 10 or if not more, right? So startups can run leaner. These traditional companies can leverage technology without taking on a lot of basically investment upfront. So all that ChatGPT moment made this moment possible. And I think these companies are also demographically changing hands in terms of from boomers. If you look at how many companies are still held by baby boomer generation, and that's going to change in the next 5-10 years. We kind of want to take advantage of that demographic shift to where these younger generation folks will come in and they will not basically adapt to what they were doing, but they will want to force the company into all these technologies that can help them to streamline their whole operations. So that's basically those three moments where the biggest innovation gap is lying within SMEs, the Main Street businesses, like we call it. The AI moment with GPT, how easy it is to scale, just custom solutions. And I think third is demographics, where it's just changing hands. And we recently got a customer just because of that, because the head of operations is basically very tech savvy. And when they were looking at a solution like Epicor, which is legacy ERP system, multi-billion-dollar manufacturing ERP system, and they couldn't put up with just even training, right? It's just so archaic. You need to learn the system and adapt to the system rather than it adapting to your operations. So we see these things happening. It's rather slow, I would say. It's not as fast, but probably in 2-3 years' time, it's going to be like, hey, how did this happen? But it's happening slowly already in the markets.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of conversation around AI. I would imagine that most of these organizations are very early in their journeys. What are the biggest misconceptions that their leaders have about how ready their organizations are for something like an AI powered ERP system?
Yeah, great question. So because you have never thought about technology first when you are running your operations, so you probably didn't do anything to be ready for this world of AI and efficiency engine, right? So you don't even have the data structured. You don't have your operations documented. So everybody is just doing things basically based on some training. So there is no like full like grasp of where and how they're gonna leverage this technology because they are not ready for it. And that's where the biggest scare come from, because they don't fully grasp, okay, how we are gonna start, how it's gonna impact my business. So that's basically AI readiness in terms of operations, right? So when we first come in, we try to ask these questions. Hey, how do you do your current operations? How is the data flowing? How do you make sure the data is consistent across? Because it's not surprising to find many inefficiencies, and also mistakes happen because the data is not consistent. One software says one thing, someone put a note somewhere else on the email, it says something else, and you make decisions based on not a full picture of the business. And usually it leads to inefficiencies, mistakes, lost opportunities, lost customers. So that's basically it.
Yeah. When it comes to data readiness, what does the process typically look like for you? Are you working backwards from the module that you're focused on and ensuring that the data that goes into that module is clean and consistent? Do you recommend like an overarching like data cleanliness and data architecture initiative to ensure that all data is prepared for being used at some point in the future? How do you think about the right first steps when it comes to an organization wanting to use its data when maybe it has not been as focused on cleaning and organizing it in the past?
Yeah, so basically we have to look into their current operations and how their data is helping them. And in most cases, we have to go back and start from scratch, right? In some cases, adjusting their existing operations or data flow into the modular like ERP system is gonna work, but in long term, it's gonna mostly break. So we actually go in and try to first understand their data and recommend how to structure that data for success and just long term, especially if they're gonna adopt technologies. So we go in, try to understand, hey, how they are using today. Is it gonna fit in? And in some cases, it usually doesn't, because as I said, you don't even think about this until the moment comes where you have to do it. So it's usually we go from existing operations and think about how it's going to scale over long term and make recommendations what's the best way to start from scratch, like about data labeling, how it's kept, and basically a whole architecture. So we usually come and build that first before we go in and start implementing it into the ERP, because that's basically the hardest part, where you want to make sure the data you need is in the right place, is in the right format, is in the right structure. And then it's much easier to build the rest of the ERP ecosystem on top of it. So basically, our first few projects, we didn't really think too much about it. But as we got closer to production and looked at their data, it was usually breaking things. And then we started thinking, okay, this is the most important thing, is to actually go back and make sure their whole data architecture is correct. Make sure what we are going to build is basically reliable for that type of data architecture before we go and do all that effort for a few months to build it out. That usually takes the most time, because data is knowledge, and usually knowledge is in the brains of the core operators in the business. And you really need to bring them together, talk to them, and make sure they are all aligned with what's going to happen. So that's basically one of the hardest components of it, but the most core components, and also something that we do at the very beginning as we are collecting requirements, which kind of merges together at the end of the operation.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long does it typically take to run that data assessment and cleaning and architecture process? How long does it typically take for you to go in and position the company to deploy one of your modular systems? And what are the criteria that influence whether it's going to be, 2 times that or, 50% of that?
Yeah, it's usually how complex their operations are, how many teams are dependent on that data, and quite frankly, the size of your operations, right? In terms of revenue, in terms of your clientele. We usually take a good month from the start until we collect all the requirements and data gathering and understanding where it is. And usually we have to talk to all the stakeholders within the company. And in an operation intensive companies, that's usually not easy, right? To bring everyone together, to give them space to think what it is, to give you the information, and then for you to distill it down, bring it into much more digestible format for everyone to look at it and say, okay, this makes sense. And even then, it's not like a process where once we make it, we never touch it. It's usually ongoing process, but we really need a good foundation and also expectation setting at the beginning, because without that, it's going to be very hard. And it's kind of like training the existing operations people in the company to help them think on what's the best way to solve that problem. And in some cases, as you're doing the project, they will come to you and say, hey, I think we can maybe remove this part because we actually didn't need it. We thought we needed it. Or, hey, this is how we can improve it, make it easier. Or this extra step was actually not necessary because we were going to do it elsewhere. So all this is like a process, and it's going to take at least a month, if not more. And as I said, like in a 3-4 month project, usually this is the most intensive part, where you're dealing with stakeholders, talking to them, and trying to make sure you get the right information. Everything else is built on top of it. As much as it's modular, the technology, but you still want to make sure that you cover most of the requirements, so you don't lose time when you have to go back and change something, right? Because everything is talking to each other, and you want to make sure once you change something, it cripples through in the right way. So that's basically the timelines. At least a month probably runs down to 1.5, 2 months.
Right. And we're going to walk through an example of your work when we share a case study of a manufacturing client. But maybe before we do, I just want to ask you a quick question about private equity. You mentioned working with private equity firms to scale their portfolio operations. What's different about working with that segment when compared to SMBs?
Yeah, so private equity looks at an opportunity not from one single lens of one business, but they look at it from a portfolio perspective. So if I can bring 10% improvement into their single company, that's just not 10%, right? That cripples through their portfolio. If they have 10 companies, 100 companies, 500 companies. So the ones, as they scale, the improvements becomes much more meaningful. So they are usually very knowledgeable in terms of what they can do, what they need to do. So that education part is usually skipped in terms of they already know what they need. So they're just like, hey, can you help me out? Can you build this technology in a way that I need? So that's basically where the conversation starts. And they're usually much more technology savvy. The companies they own is usually more traditional, but the teams managing these portfolios, the technology, and that adoption, they're usually very ready to come in and say, I know what I need. Let's go and see if it's feasible with you guys and we can go explore the opportunity.
Great. Let's talk about the example that I just cited. You're working with a manufacturing client. What problem did they come to you with, and why was it so urgent?
Yeah, so when we first met them, they were growing at 20-30% every year. They have operations in Canada and US. 80% is in the US. And one of the biggest things for the owner of the company was, hey, I have no clue what's happening within my company because he has manufacturing overseas. He has a team in Europe. He has a team in Canada. He has a team in US. He has projects across 2 countries. So there's so much information that he needs to process every day to understand how the health of his business, are the projects are going in the right way. Can they support 20-30% increase of revenue every year, right? So to him, it was basically a huge bottleneck where he thought he could not scale the company and grow the company effectively without having a central hub or central system to manage all their operations under one single roof. So that was their biggest challenge. And the good thing about this client, and I think that usually happens if someone knows they need some system, he understood the problem and he understood he wasn't able to scale beyond what their current capacity is without having some kind of technology in place to help them run their business. That's usually the best case scenario where the business understands it. And just like a few months ago, I saw a couple like opportunities related to the industry, and I'm like, you must be taking advantage of these, right? And he said, no, because he doesn't have the system in place for him to go take more risk. Because if you take more risk and you cannot deliver it, a mistake, just a very small project, cost him like K because they couldn't deliver. They thought the inventory was in the project side. It wasn't. It was going to be delayed, so he had to airship the whole material, which cost him extra 100K, and it completely burnt his margin. Obviously, probably forced him to go into loss for that specific project. But this is not uncommon. Like small things just gets bypassed because you have so many things you are happening in your business. These things would easily be flagged by the system saying, hey, you have a project coming in next 2 weeks, but your inventory is still not shipped. Do you want to do something about it, right? Or your project is a month due, but we still don't have the manufacturing order, or we still don't have the shipping. So what are you going to do about it? So if the system is proactive, they can solve these issues, right? The team is equipped with all the skills necessary to go and do their business, but they need basically assistant, like an admin, like an agent, if you like to call it, to tell them, hey, you need to do this or that. And then the owner has the full capacity to understand, hey, what's next month looking like? Are we insane? Do we have the inventory? Do we have the resources to go do all the projects, right? So that was basically the problem we were trying to solve it. And thanks to our system, now they can go scale at faster speed. And what happens once you implement the technology and you have everything in single like place, now you can build even like sales tools. Like imagine a company to win a bid, they would have to do hundreds of bids every month, if not more. But what if we can come in, because we now understand all of your business, we have all the quotes, all the information, all the sales, all that data in one place. Now we can build AI workflows for automating part of the quoting. automating part of the bidding, which kind of saves you significant time. Then you can go focus on others more strategic work, right? So this only happens once you have the system in place. If system in place, I cannot just come next day and build you this solution, right? So what we build is the foundation, but what will happen in next few years, we build on top of these systems, these workflows powered by AI. That's where I think is the biggest economic output that will happen in terms of savings, in terms of revenue opportunities. But we are not there because we are still early in the game. We are still building that foundation for these customers. But that's basically the vision. Most of these customers understand, okay, in 2-3 years, this will be amazing. And I will be much more ahead of our competitors because they will not be able to even like process this much demand, the sales, the projects, right? So we are basically preparing them for the next decade. And it's not like you're going to build an ERP and you're going to see the real ROI next day, right? So you will see some ROI immediately, but the real ROI happens over longer term.
Yeah. Can you walk us through how you went from that before state, which was, hey, I have no information on my business and it's difficult for me to make investments in the future when I don't know what's going on, to a world where one has visibility into their operations, into inventory management and supply chain and so on and so forth. What did you do in between? You mentioned the problem that came to you with. What was the next step?
Yeah, so first step for us to go into their facility usually and talk to all the stakeholders in the company. And we collect as much information independent of the person who requests this like project to understand what the real problems are. Right? In some cases, you will be surprised that even they don't have full like picture of the problem sets. So we go do that. We try to understand where their data are, mostly understand their current operations. Once we understand that, then we start making recommendations. Okay, what do you want to do? What's your first day going to look like? What's your most critical component? Where do you want to start? Do you want the phased approach? Do you want all in one? So you start day one and you can use it all. And then we even make recommendations there. Once we kind of have a good feeling on what they're looking for, we make recommendations on, okay, this is going to be your phased approach. This is what we need to be doing in the meantime for the data architecture, how we are going to structure it, how we're going to process that. So some of the operations can go insane while we're building basically the whole ERP at the back end. So that first step is really trying to go and understand and giving them really the confidence and trust that, hey, we truly understand your business. And now it's just a matter of time for us to go solve your problems, right? So I think that's where the biggest comforting piece happens is most of these customers, because ERP is usually you make a promise into like next 3 months, 4 months, in some cases a year, saying, hey, this is going to be done. But I want to know today that I need to have a trust in your process that you're going to actually go do it and you understand my problems to actually go do it correctly. So it's usually that just building that relationship with the stakeholders, giving them like right information in the right time for them to understand, okay, this is how it's going to happen, the phases. So they see progress every 2 weeks. Usually that's how we go about it. So they can have the confidence that we can actually deliver at the end. So usually what happens in the first month, some people in the company will be suspicious of our efforts. A month into like showing them some use cases, showing part of the solution, they're going to be like, okay, I know like X person made the right decision to work with you guys because you guys actually understand the problem. Because to them, sometimes they have a huge problem in their mind and we propose a rather basic, quick solution and they're like, no way, why was this not solved before, right? And we actually go show it in real time. This is where the modular component becomes very powerful because they can see it in real world and action and working. They're like, oh my God, why did I like spend my last 20, 30 years doing this in such a way where you could have done it in 2-3 weeks? So that's basically the process. And then we start phasing it out based on the modules they prioritized until they're fully like phased out all the modules they need. That process can take a few more months, but we want to make sure in 2-3 months, we can make you ready for production in terms of what the core modules that you need to run your business. And then we start adding the rest of it as you become more comfortable and based on the feedback and the usage, You just continue to add it rather than waiting for the whole ERP to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the typical tech stack of one of these AI-powered ERP systems? Does it depend on what someone is using already in terms of their Microsoft shop or a Google shop? Tell me a little bit more about what this ends up looking like.
Yeah, so we leverage open source technology and we leverage AI to build our like end user ready ERP systems. In terms of like, we usually host it on their own server. It can be Google's, Amazon's, Microsoft, doesn't matter. But it's a fairly standard backend that we power through mostly Python, which is AI friendly language that for most of you don't know. And then most of it is very standard across the customer base. So because we are building something completely new, in some cases we integrate into their existing like solutions like accounting, like QuickBooks and others, for them to continue to run their like finance and accounting in their like existing systems. But that's just an integration, not like they need to switch into something else. But that's about it. So basically, it's a completely new solution. We give them an option on where they want to host it. All the security aspect is taken care of, obviously, and we just provide them the solution. So most people, they would care less about what the backend is and what the architecture is, as long as it solves their problem. And usually they're not as tech savvy. And the only concern they will have around security, make sure the data stays within their ecosystem, not get shared. That's probably their biggest concern in terms of like the whole cybersecurity aspect of it. But we usually use existing platforms like Google's, the Microsoft, Amazon's of the world to host their service in the microservice platforms. So that's basically as far as they will go in terms of being worried about what tech stack they will be using, and standard across the customer base. Just the hosting platform might be different.
Yeah. And going back to that case study, they started with information that was inaccessible and fragmented. The end state is, I guess, better visibility into what is going on within the business. Tell me a little bit more about that kind of after state. Like what were they able to do that they weren't able to before, and what did that enable in terms of business operations? Whether it led to more investments or greater revenue growth, or how did they see return from this outside of just having better visibility?
Yeah. So it would used to be like taking a few hours from the person to understand where their operations are in terms of projects, inventory, and all that stuff. You cannot do that within minutes. Especially the system can flag it for you where is there anything that you need to pay attention to. So it gives you a lot of time back in terms of just your daily workflow. And then in terms of revenue, we are still early in our like adoption, right? So what we expect is they're going to be able to continue their growth and also start taking on bigger projects. And when we say bigger projects, it's going to be 5 to 10x bigger size, because now they can support that, right? So imagine doing even just a couple of those projects will like allow them to like grow not just 20-30%, but 50-60%. So that's just the revenue enablement of the platform is massive as we build all those workflows I mentioned about, like procurement, bidding, and all that stuff. That's very, very useful. And in terms of just savings, in terms of the time that's used for the admin stuff, right? No one has to go into Excel sheet to type in some numbers. Someone gonna go check and verify that. None of that needs to happen anymore. So just data comes in through usually the workflows, and in like core pieces, it needs to be approved by a management. That's it, right? So you are basically completely freed up your whole day to go and actually do productive work. And that usually ranges from 20 to 80% depending on the person. So that's basically what we are seeing right now, and gives them basically full visibility. I think that's number one thing where they want to understand, okay, the whole thing is running, whole thing can be audited, right? Especially in the case of manufacturing, we work with a steel manufacturer right now for the auto industry. Their quality control system has to be in place from day one, because anytime someone can come in and audit, or their customers can request for an audit, or if there's a recall on a certain, let's say, car, they need to go back all the way to the part that was produced in certain batch, that so they need to recall all of that, right? So this used to take days, if not weeks, to do that. Now all of the system can just give you all the information in one shot, and where you just need to go and send information to the right people and the organization to get that done. So the whole visibility in terms of just also quality control and audit gives them a lot of confidence, because some of these businesses, especially in production and food, will be subject to like random audits from the government organizations and sometimes their customers, right? So this just gives them like a booster where they can just do it in a few hours versus days and weeks.
Awesome. Let me ask you lastly, as we come to a close, you've warned that like waiting is risky. What would you say to a CEO that is still on the fence about moving forward with something like this?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we felt the challenges were in this industry is how prohibitive in terms of investment to go and do these projects. Because of the AI and how fast we can scale now, we basically flipped the industry into more like a SaaS industry, right? Hey, we can go in a few months, you can just pay subscription, very small upfront fee. You can start using the system and the platform and see how it gives you confidence, how it helps you within your operations. Because the more you wait, the harder it becomes for you to compete down the line, because there will be businesses who will take this on and will be basically improving their business, streamline their business. And for you to catch on is going to be much harder, because it's basically very exponential growth in terms of AI. So once you have the foundation, everything you build on top is going to be exponential for you. And if you are not there yet, it's going to be very hard for you to catch up. Like I was talking to someone in the private equity who used to run like a $200 million construction business, and they were basically saying that they were used to bidding higher than other competitors because they had a system that was able to capture all the data requirements in such a detail none of their competitors would be. And it gave their customers so much confidence that, okay, these guys will actually do the work because they understand the requirements much, much better. And they give me much more confidence in terms of the budget, the timelines. So they would usually win the bids despite being more expensive than the competition. So this gives you that power where you have the full control of your business rather than going and competing on like price every time. And because of the how exponential this improvement technology is, the more you wait, and probably you will be, I think, losing people to companies are much more innovative looking, where you're gonna start building actual talent to other companies, and you might actually not have the capacity to do this technology driven projects over time. So I think there's like, it's two-sided, where people will be attracted to companies who are always trying to push the boundaries, especially the younger generation. And I think that more of those people will come into this workforce, which hasn't been the case for the past 20 years because how we just outsourced everything to other countries. So more of that will happen because there will not be many interesting jobs to do, and this production, manufacturing, construction, and other traditional ecosystem will be much more interesting for these people to go and solve these problems for.
Turgut, thank you so much for coming on Just Curious.
Thank you very much for having me.